All right, we're back again with the 51 Chevy S10 Suburban panel truck project. And when we left off, we fused the two bodies together, front and back. Body mounts in the back, a whole bunch of welding in the front. Well, more like midways, but you get the idea. Next move, as the title states, is assembling the body. That's going to include fenders, hood, front clip, all that, a lot of that junk over there. The doors and the back hatch doors all have to go back on. Now, the more interesting part is going to be the front here, because based on the angles of the hood and the fenders, there's actually a taper that has to be maintained on both sides to line the fenders up with the hood. Now, what it's going to end up meaning, based on some test fits, because of this HVAC box and fan and junk, I'm probably going to have to chop a little metal out of that right fender. And on the left side, I'm probably going to have to chop a little bit of this material out so I can get the angle I need on this side for that fender. What it's also going to mean is our ECU is going to have to get relocated. Not right there, obviously, but it's going to have to get relocated from this point right here where it used to be on the S10. Plus, I'm going to have to delete that overflow bottle and probably add some universal crap in its place. Our ABS module is going to have to be resituated with a different kind of mount to our fender to hold it in this general area right here. Same with the fuse box. As for our air cleaner box, that will be getting replaced with a aftermarket K&N type air filter, so we don't have this big bulky box right here. It'll help clean up things just a little bit. Last thing I did was remove all our wiper hardware here, the motor that went right here along with the linkages, that all connected right here, because I'm going to relocate it to this point here where these holes for the other windshield wipers were at, and more or less try to rebuild that whole assembly to fit in this area so our windows there can have some wiper action. So with that, we're getting started with the front clip. Let's go. Well, an unfortunate reality with this type of build is you're going to end up having to cut up some stuff you didn't expect to have to cut up, as is the case of this hood right here. I had to cut chunks out of it in order for this hood to fit around this section of the S10 body. I did take a moment to lop some of this out, and this didn't even give me near enough open space to accommodate the hood, so some metal had to come out of the hood. Yeah. Of course, this hood is rusted all the hell anyway, so it's not like a total loss if I was cutting up a perfectly good hood. But anyway, go ahead and continue to try to fit this hood on here. What'll probably end up happening is, after fitting the hood on here, I'm probably going to weld some crude little box sections to go over that to cover up these areas here, especially the area around the blower motor there, to keep all that covered up so it can at least look somewhat decent and not too cheesy. Yeah, let's put the hood on. All right, we've got our hood kind of pre-positioned, I guess. Good way to put it. It's not completely flush where it needs to be for one simple reason. Our radiator and condenser are much wider than the width of the front of the hood, so they're obstructing. What it means is I'm gonna have to move the tube back enough to allow this hood to clear. But to safely do that, I'm gonna have to get that fan clutch out because, well, unfortunately we can't use it if I have to move this rad and condenser way back as far as I can go to allow this hood to close. It's not a big deal because, well, I could just get some electric fans and slap them on there like I did on truck stang and be able to at least get some decent cooling on the radiator, so we don't have to sit here and try to Mickey Mouse some kind of aftermarket radiator that's narrow enough to fit in here while still having some cooling ability. So with that, yeah, I guess I'll have to take the hood back off and pull this fan off and see about moving our rads back. So that's next. Alright, we got our fan clutch off. I also took the condenser off and disconnected different lines, all that crap. The plan here is going to be to weld a couple of brackets. These little pieces of metal are actually what remained of the last 3 or 4 inches of frame rail on the S10 that I chopped off when I fit the body on earlier. I'm going to weld these in place because they have these large holes in them that seem to accommodate the little pegs on the bottom of the radiator pretty good. So figure I'll weld those in place and that'll help cradle our radiator. Plan also with the radiator is going to be to have it at a slight angle, sort of how an older Corvette's radiator is situated. It's kind of at a slight angle, so you can be able to get that raked front end like on a Corvette, but we're not going for that. We're just going for clearance on the top here. So it's going to be like that. Of course, I'll have my flush electric fan underneath in that position. Trying to see what else I might have to fit to this here to help hold this radiator in place. More than likely, I'm going to have to fabricate some other kind of bracket or something. Maybe some type of thing that links up from here to here. Who knows? We'll figure it out. Main thing is to get the radiator cradled so we can then continue with the fitting of our hood and, well, everything else for that matter. So let me go ahead and burn some metal. Stand by. Alright, we have our brackets welded down and they're currently cradling our radiator, which, as you can see, has a backward angling to it. And we got it pretty close to the front of the engine here. There should still be enough room for the fans. Worst case, I can always resituate it like that a little bit to get the spacing I need. Like I stated before, I will probably have to make some type of bracket using some rods with something that would hold the radiator right here so the thing doesn't do this number here. So with that all said and done, next thing will be to fabricate something to hold our condenser in place as well, and then carefully manipulate all the metal lines for everything, the transmission lines as well as the AC lines, so they can be reattached to both the rad and the condenser safely and straight so nothing gets compromised. But once we get that all back together, then we can go back to test fitting our hood and ultimately the rest of the front parts. So let's continue. Okay, as an added bonus to these brackets right here for the main radiator, I welded another little piece of scrap angle iron type material, also salvaged from the frame rail pieces. to serve as cradles for our condenser right here, so they can both be cradled at about the same angle. Also took a moment to cut some of that scrap to make a little brace right here, which, even though it wasn't necessary, I like redundancy. So this is all set up real nice to hold both radiators. So give me a second, let me put these in place. All right, we have both the radiator and the condenser setting in place. The radiator, as noted before, has little pegs on either side to rest in the holes on these brackets, while our condenser just kind of loosely rests on here, but everything is in position for all our hoses and stuff to be hooked back up. I'm still going to have to make some type of mount or some type of bracket or whatever to support the tops of both the radiators here. And I'm probably going to hack up this old S10 core support to fabricate said bracket for all this stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and cut up some metal and do some trial fitting and screwing around with this stuff to see what kind of garbage I can come up with for this monstrosity. So as usual, stand by. All right, we have our radiator core support, I guess you can call it, because that's pretty much what it is, all set up. Took a piece of angle iron bed frame here, welded it to this odd piece of stamped sheet metal that was formed like angle iron, I guess. And then I took these two braces that came from the 51 and welded them to this assembly, which is welded to the angle iron. Then I had to trim these rods down, cut them here and here, trim them a little bit, and then weld them in place, and then drill some holes. Well, there was already a hole right there, but I had to drill an extra hole there and 2 holes there to use 1/4-inch bolts to hold the bottom part down. Then we also, to help cushion the radiator and condenser, we added some pieces of old radiator hose to go between everything, so none of this stuff is metal on metal. So we'll be able to at least ride comfortably knowing that this thing is not gonna chafe the radiator or the condenser and compromise them. And as we can see here, this thing is pretty sturdy. It's got enough distance here from the front of the engine, got enough room for our flush fans when we do mount them. I got a 12-inch one that'll go on the condenser for the AC side, and I'll have to get a 16-inch for the other side for the regular radiator. But with that done, now we can move back on to our hood fitting and fenders. So let's continue with the work. Okay, at this point, we have our fender, our right fender, secured by 3 bolts around that crescent-shaped lip that we've seen before. Now, as stated before, we're going to have to do a little hacking on the hood as well as the fenders to get everything to fit where it needs to. Can't wait to see how the left side's going to end up, but this is a prime example of what's going to happen on that side. But, as we could see, our blower motor and all sticks out right here, but our hood is situated more or less where it's going to need to be. When I pick this up, when it is fully anchored, this is what we're pretty much going to be going with right here. So like I said, I'll have to build some type of little box or something to go around all this that'll be part of the hood and fit enough around this where it'll look, well, somewhat normal-ish. The next thing I got to do is fit our grille in place because, well, currently the hood is resting in such a way that it's much lower than it's going to need to be in order to accommodate this grille here. Also, what I'm going to need to do is chop these mounts here, these body mounts for the old core support. It's got to go. I need flush frame rails right there in order to be able to situate this thing on the ends of the frame rails so I can get a good idea of where our hood's going to sit, as well as where our fender is going to end up sitting. Once that's all established and our hood is fully situated where it's going to go, we could finish up with our fenders. So, time to do a little hacking. Stand by. Okay, got a little chopping done right there as stated before. I will have to do a lot more chopping, but mainly on this raggedy grill right here. So, no loss there by me hacking it, because look at the damn thing. Anyway, propped up the fender right here with a log so we can get a good idea of the alignment of the panels. Same thing with the board under the front of the hood to get a good idea of how it's going to sit accordingly. Anyway, as far as our grill is concerned, why I have to hack on it is because, well, this frame rail sticks out way farther than the imaginary front of the 51 body. And as such, this right here is not able to go back. So I'm going to have to do a little cutting right here on this brace and little by little chop away just enough to allow me to insert this thing far enough back to be able to get it to align with the hood and fender. I also removed a bottom base plate, I don't know what the heck you'd call it, that was on this thing. So all that's out of the way. But as stated before, got to do a little hacking on this raggedy grill so we could try to fit it on next. Let's continue to work. Hot as hell out here. Alright, we got our grill situated where it needs to be in order to line up with the hood and our right fender. Nothing is bolted down, so that explains all the gaps and all that stuff. As far as the frame rail fronts that are sticking out, really couldn't chop all that off because there's some critical mounting points for our makeshift core support. And I need to have something somewhere that I might use if I'm going to put any bumper back on or any kind of grill guard or anything to just kind of protect the front of this thing. So for right now, I can't chop that off. And even then, if I do chop it off, it's going to be so far back that I might end up having to move our radiator back that much more. So for right now, we have to deal with that and that. But anyway, as stated before, that's how that looks. Let me take the grill off to show what kind of fuckery I had to do. Okay, because all the little subframe support, whatever the heck you might call it, that was used to hold all this stuff together, like right here and on the other side, I had to, well, there's a bit of it still left right there. I had to cut all that crap out in order to make room to be able to fit around the frame rails. So I cut some scrap metal and welded it in place with some nice, wonderful popcorn welds on this rusty metal to help hold this together on both sides. And I took the remainder of these brackets that were originally going the length of that and just trimmed them down because I need to still be able to support it at the top here and here. And those pieces remaining where they were pushing up into the condenser and our core support rods right there, so that metal had to go. And then I had to trim right here. I had to trim some of that out on both sides, as well as the open areas, as you clearly can see, were necessary to clear our frame rail and all. And even on the frame rail, I had to trim off this section right here on both sides from the old body mount stuff for the old core support, as well as most of those mounting brackets, whatever you call them. All that stuff had to get cut down in order to help allow our grill to clear. So with that and all this show and tell done, I can go ahead and actually start bolting together our right fender to this thing and see what I might have to do as far as securing this whole monstrosity in place right here. Might have to weld some more brackets or whatever. We'll see. Still shooting from the hip. Alright, I got our fender bolted up. 3 bolts along the side of the grill, 1 right here. Obviously I still have to put the other fender on and see if I need to put any kind of brackets or anything to connect the grill to the frame rails as mentioned before. But our next focus is going to be to try to get this fender set up to go here so we can fully connect the grill to everything enough to be able to finalize this whole front end build. But of course, as you can see on this side, we've got an ABS module and a fuse box that are essentially in the way, so I'm going to have to figure out something with that as far as new brackets or new positioning of it in this open area right here, so I could be able to get our fender in place. So stand by as usual. Alright, well, we got our left fender in place, secured to the grill. Just like on the right side, we got 3 bolts along the side of the grill, 1 right there because the tab that was right there is rusted all to hell. We have our 3 nuts and bolts around the little crescent-shaped lip right there. As you could also see, I only cut a minimum amount of metal out of that side. I had to kind of persuade these two to come together good enough to be able to line them up to get the nuts and bolts in place, but it's in. As far as securing our grill, the way it looks, this bottom portion of the grill piece, I could possibly drill a hole up through the bottom and into the frame where I could reach into the frame rail and insert a bolt in there and a nut on the bottom to hold the grill in place, which should in turn help stabilize the rest of the assembly. If necessary, I might have to add some other metal. We'll get to that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But all in all, everything is in place here. Had to trim metal right here. This all had to be cut out in order to accommodate the rad. The only other thing we got to factor in here is this ABS module. Trying to figure out what I'm going to do with that. A couple possibilities. One is to remove this whole bracket and fabricate a bracket that will hold this module, and then worst case, which is probably going to happen, is me cutting out a little channel on the fender to be able to accommodate the module with its new bracket. Another possibility, which will still involve me cutting out a channel, is taking this existing bracket and chopping it up to where it can be used to mount it underneath the fender at a lower enough point where it'll work. But of course, I'll also have to chop into the hood too. We'll chop a little bit more metal out of the hood in order to fit around it as needed. But hey, do what you got to do. All in all, most of our front end is in place. Eventually I might figure out something with the bumper, and then again, who knows, I might just say screw the bumper, because these bumper delete looks are sometimes unique. But cart before the horse. Let's figure out this ABS module and get that grille secured and get our hood in place. Let's get that done so we can actually say the front end is done. Stand by. All right, we got our front end for all intents done. I'm probably not going to mess with the bumper because, I mean, the bumper delete look ain't half bad. Plus it'll be a pain in the butt to really get it on there. I might figure it out later, who knows. But as stated before, I had to create some boxes for the sides of the hood here where I chopped all the metal out. Also, it covers up the areas I chopped out of the fenders. The right side ain't half bad and complex. It's just a simple box because, well, just a HVAC blower. But the other side right here, yeah, it's a nice little hot mess right here, but it's effective because it's covering up everything as intended. Now, we do have some gappage in spots because, well, between the warpage of the hood and all the metal that I cut out and all the mess with the fenders and everything, there's no chance of getting any of this crap to line up properly. Even the body right here, because of all the stresses of moving the body around in the beginning, all this stuff is distorted. Even on the other side, there is a spot right here where the body is dented. So yeah, we have a little distortion right here that would factor into any misalignments with the hood and all, but it's on. I still have to figure out a way to pin everything up on the hood so the hood can actually stay in place and not flutter around. But let me pull the hood off real quick so we can get a quick look-see at the crap underneath. We're going to start off with our ECU. Took a couple bracket pieces and fabricated mounts. This piece underneath here is a separate piece, and then I took another bracket piece as the pictures are showing and cut that up to where I could weld it all together and provide a couple of mounting points for the ECU itself. I had to do a little bit of fine-tuning with the hood to make sure that the hood would actually clear the ECU when it's laid down, which it does, so we're good on that. The other area is our ABS module. Again, had to take the old bracket, chop it up, re-weld it in such a way where I was able to bolt it to the fender here and here, so our module is nice and sturdy. Last thing is our fuse box, where that dirt sack is at. That plastic sack is actually covering our fuse box because there's really no suitable spot to put it where it would be safe from splash ups from the wheel. Go up under here. I had to fabricate a mounting bracket that actually attaches to the underside of the fender as well as the side of the frame rail, and it cradles the fuse box while it's in our bag here. And a couple of bungee cords help secure it so it doesn't flutter around even in the mount. And obviously, if I have to work on the fuse box or pull a fuse out, I will have to remove the bungee cords and really more than likely pull the tire off to more easily get under there to pull it out. But it's one of those deals where you just got to take what you can get with this, because this is a Frankenstein mess, so it is what it is. The only other problem we still have is our radiator here. At these points on both sides, it still touches the underside of the hood. So later on, I'm probably going to be trying to find a radiator that's a little bit narrower and then just adapting the fittings for the transmission lines in order to put a narrower radiator in here so the hood will kind of sit better. We'll see how it plays out though. So also, one last thing. Our fenders are also secured by these rods right here that are fabricated from rods salvaged from the 51 teardown. Cut, re-welded, bolted at one point on the fender and up here on the S10 firewall. On the other side, same thing, except with a shorter rod right here, so the fenders are stationary and aren't just bouncing all over the place. So with that, we're ready to move on to our doors. Doors are going to be pretty quick though, especially the left side and right side. Just bolt them on, fabricate a crude latch for them because all the stuff's a hot mess anyway. Rear doors are going to be even more interesting. Wait and see. Stand by. All right, we got our doors on. The front doors weren't so bad. It was just a matter of putting some bolts in. Bottom hinges, since I didn't have enough of the fine tread bolts that went in these things and the other ones were trashed, I was able to source enough of them to put 2 on each of the top hinges, and then the bottom ones just used a size smaller with a nut behind it since it's easy to reach back there. These doors don't have any, well, this door doesn't have any latch or handle or anything on it, whilst that one does, but the latches don't work or anything. All that stuff is rusted and just trashed, so I'm gonna have to figure out some kind of way to latch the doors, especially from the inside, but the doors do shut. As for our back doors, as you clearly seen, the back doors were really just a basket case, and the way I hung them was an even better basket case because, well, I used regular door hinges to hang them up here. Bootleg as hell, but given the hand we were dealt here with these rusty doors and everything, it's the best we could really do, because here's where the old hinges are supposed to go. All that stuff is rusted out. Never mind the fact that finding an actual set of hinges for this particular year range truck, panel truck at that, are difficult. So yep, door hinges. And for the time being, I have a mixture of self-tapping screws and sheet metal screws in there, which we clearly know that shit's not going to hold up with prolonged opening and closing, much less vibration from driving. So more than likely what's going to end up happening is I'm going to weld this trash on here. As you can see, who cares about the doors if I weld on them, because, well, the doors are garbage. Really, the body's garbage. So welding any of this stuff on here is not going to matter. But the doors do open and close as far as with the hinges. Yeah, the doors open and close with the hinges. So, yeah, they're pretty much on. Same thing with these doors. I'm going to have to fabricate some form of latch to allow the doors to stay shut. At least on the outside, I could just have a latch versus trying to do something on the inside, since, well, this is more or less like a cargo truck anyway, so having a latch on the inside would be pointless. Anyway, body assembly's pretty much done. There might be some little odds and ends that I might decide to get to later, like this rusty pan right here. I might just chop that out because, well, it's rusty crap. And the bumper, not really sure if I'm going to put this bumper on here because, well, it didn't put it on the front, and it's a big old hulking bumper, and trying to fabricate brackets for it be a pain in the ass, and I don't feel like doing that. I just want to be able to drive the thing. So yeah, our body assembly is pretty much done for all intents and purposes. You've already seen the front end just as well, and that basket case of a setup. So my little basket case truck is pretty much put back together body wise. So with that, the next installment when we come back is going to be to actually fit the thing out. A lot of stuff that has to go on here: headlights, parking lights for turn signals, tail lights in the back, Got to do the interior completely. Still got the S10 seats to go in here. Gonna have to do some work with the dash and all. Mount the battery inside the truck right about that area. All kinds of little junk I gotta do. So stay tuned for the next installment of this crazy project. And until the next time, as usual, like, subscribe, notifications, all that good stuff, and we'll get back to this shit show once again. So I will catch you later. I'm out.